They laughed. 30 grown adults, blood, marriage, history laughed while my father stripped me down in front of everyone and treated me like a misbehaving child, not metaphorically. Literally. I stood there, wineglass sweating in my hand, stomach tight, ears ringing, while my father, retired judge, family hero, untouchable man, pointed at me in his own dining room and said, "You're grounded. Go to your room." I was 29 years old, and that moment, that was the night everything broke. But let me back this up. Because this didn't start with Thanksgiving. It started months earlier, the morning my grandmother died, and nobody told me the truth. My name is Tori Brennan. I live in Portland, Oregon. Small apartment. Too many plants. Student loan debt. I'll probably still be paying off when I'm 40. I design landscapes for people who have more money than imagination, and I love it even if my family treats it like a phase I'll grow out of. My father, Richard Brennan, never forgave me for not becoming a lawyer. He's 6'1", silver-haired, still carries himself like he's wearing a robe even though he retired years ago. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. He knows how to make silence do the work for him. When my grandmother Eleanor Brennan passed away, I got the call at 6:14 a.m. I remember the time because I was already awake, sitting at my drafting table, tracing lines over a half-finished rain garden design. My mom's voice came through thin and careful. "Tori, grandma's gone." I drove to the hospital in total silence. No music. No podcast. Just rain tapping against the windshield and my own breathing sounding too loud inside my chest. When I arrived, my dad was already there. Not crying. Not sitting. On the phone. I caught words like probate and filing timeline before he noticed me and ended the call without saying goodbye. My brother Garrett stood beside him. Dark suit. Perfect posture. Arm casually hooked around Dad's shoulder, like they were about to take a campaign photo. They looked like a unit. I looked like an afterthought. The last time I'd seen Grandma Eleanor, she'd been sitting in her wheelchair in the garden behind her house, gripping my hand harder than I thought she could. "I've taken care of things," she'd whispered. "You trust me? Right?" I nodded. Because when your grandmother looks at you like that, you nod. Even if you don't know what she means yet. The funeral came 3 days later, stone church. White lilies everywhere. The kind of place that smells like old money and old secrets. My father gave the eulogy. 11 minutes about the Brennan legacy, about tradition, about sons carrying the family forward. He said Garrett's name 4 times. My mother's once. He never said mine. Afterward, during the reception line, an older man I didn't recognize took my hand gently. "Your grandmother was very proud of you," he said quietly. "I'll be in touch." Before I could ask his name, he disappeared into the crowd. That night, the family gathered at Grandma's house. The white colonial on Hawthorne Street, the one she'd built long before marrying my grandfather. Candles. Sterling silver. Peanut Noir breathing on the sideboard like a performance. Dad raised his glass. "Your grandmother left everything to me to manage," he announced. "I'll distribute assets based on capability." His eyes landed on me. "That means you don't need to worry about it, Tori. Complex things aren't really your strength." People chuckled politely. I felt something burn behind my ribs, but I stayed quiet. That's what I'd been trained to do. Later that night, in my old bedroom, I found the envelope, cream-colored paper. My name written in shaky blue ink I'd recognize anywhere. Inside was a letter and part of a trust document. Highlighted in yellow, beneficiary, Victoria Brennan. My hands shook so badly I had to sit down. The letter said everything my father never would. Men like him don't hear women. They hear documents. Wait for the right time. You are the builder. Don't let them tear you down. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't say a word. I went back to my tiny apartment and went back to work. Because when you're raised to believe you're small, you learn to survive quietly. Then I saw the email, an email Garrett sent my dad, accidentally forwarded to me. Subject line: Trust Amendment Draft Petition. Inside it, my brother described me as financially incompetent, unstable, unfit. And then the line that changed everything: she won't fight it. She never fights anything, that's the beauty of it. I stared at that sentence for a long time. Then I took screenshots. I backed them up, And when my mother called to invite me to Thanksgiving, saying Dad wanted to mend things, I said yes. Not because I believed him, but because I knew something he didn't. And because some fights are worth letting everyone watch. That Thanksgiving table. 30 relatives. One empty chair, and a man who thought he still owned my silence. He was wrong. Thanksgiving morning didn't feel like a holiday. It felt like a stage being built. By 10 a.m., cars lined both sides of Hawthorne Street, cousins I barely knew, aunts who smelled like expensive perfume and judgment, kids running through the hallway with socks sliding on hardwood floors. Laughter bounced off the walls like nothing was wrong. Like we weren't about to rip this family open. I helped in the kitchen because no one asked me to do anything else. That hadn't changed since I was 12. My mom and my sister-in-law sat at the breakfast nook sipping tea, talking about table settings and dessert plates, while I chopped celery for the stuffing. Knife hitting wood. Over and over, rhythmic grounding. At 4 o'clock sharp, we sat down. The big oak table seated 18. Everyone else, me included, got placed at a folding table in the living room. I was wedged between a 9-year-old cousin and an empty chair. Message received. My father stood at the head of the table like he was presiding over court. "This Thanksgiving is special," he said, lifting his wineglass. "We've lost my mother this year. But the Brennan family endures." Applause. "I'm especially proud of my son Garrett," he continued, smiling at him. "He just won the biggest case of his career." More applause. Someone from the kids' table, Aunt Margaret, called out, "What about Tori?" I opened my mouth. Dad cut in smoothly. "Tori's still finding herself. She's creative. We'll give her that." Laughter rolled across both tables. Every laugh landed like a tap on my spine. After dinner, when the plates were cleared and the port wine came out, my father stood again. "I'll be making an important announcement about my mother's estate tomorrow morning," he said. "I expect everyone to be present." His eyes locked onto mine. That smile he gave me. It wasn't warm, it was sharpened. That night, while I washed dishes alone, Garrett leaned against the kitchen doorway, swirling wine in his glass. "You should thank Dad," he said casually, "for even letting you sit at the table." I didn't turn around. "Do you know what Grandma left me?" I asked quietly. The air changed. He left without answering. 10 minutes later, my father's voice thundered from the living room. "Tori, get in here. Now." 30 faces turned toward me. My father stood in the center of the room. Finger pointed like I was 12 again. "What did you say to your brother?" he demanded. "You think you can manipulate this family?" I tried to speak. He didn't let me. "You're grounded," he said loudly. "Go to your room until you apologize." For half a second, the room froze. Then they laughed. 30 adults, laughing. I felt my face burn so hot my ears rang. I searched the room for my mother. She was staring at her hands. No one said stop. No one defended me. I looked my father dead in the eye and said one word. "All right." Then I turned and walked upstairs. At 4:15 a.m., I left. No suitcase, no goodbye. Just a tote bag, a folder, and a decision. I waited at a diner down the road until sunrise. At 7:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Garrett, where are you? Dad's looking for you." I didn't reply. Back at the house, my father knocked on my bedroom door. Silence. He opened it. The room was empty. No clothes, no me. He came downstairs and announced, "Tori ran off." "That settles it." That's when the doorbell rang. The family lawyer stood on the porch. And everything my father thought he controlled stopped. The thing about silence is this: when it breaks loud. Inside that house, the laughter hadn't even fully died down when the doorbell rang. Not a polite ring, firm, intentional. Like someone who expected to be answered. My cousin Danny later told me my father didn't even flinch at first. He just frowned, annoyed, like an interruption he hadn't scheduled. My mom opened the door, and there he was. Gray suit, brown leather briefcase, wire rim glasses, calm in the way only people with leverage are calm. "Good morning," he said. "I'm Harold Caldwell, attorney for Eleanor Brennan." The room went quiet in layers. Caldwell walked in like he owned the space. Not aggressively, just confidently. He set his briefcase right on the dining table, on top of the Thanksgiving linen, and unclasped it without asking permission. My father stood. Harold, he said flatly. You weren't invited. Caldwell met his eyes. I'm not here by invitation. I'm here by obligation. That's when the first crack appeared. I wasn't there yet. But every single person in that room felt it. My father tried to control the tone. He always did. This is a private family matter, he said. You can leave now. Caldwell didn't move. Your mother executed an irrevocable trust 8 years ago, he said evenly. I am here because you've violated it. 30 people. Not a sound. You're mistaken. My father snapped. My mother was confused. Whatever she signed. Caldwell opened the briefcase. He pulled out cream-colored paper, thick and official, and held it up so everyone could see the red notary seal. She was evaluated by her physician the same week, Caldwell said. Fully competent, documented. My Aunt Margaret leaned forward. Garrett's smile disappeared. This trust names one beneficiary, Caldwell continued, Victoria Brennan. That's when my father lost his composure. Get out of my house, he said through his teeth. Now. Caldwell nodded once. I will, but I'll be back at 2 o'clock. For the formal reading. He paused at the door. And I won't be coming alone. I arrived at 1:58 p.m. I walked through the kitchen entrance, folder in hand, heart pounding but steady. The living room had been rearranged. Chairs lined up like pews, 30 people facing the fireplace. My father stood at the front holding a single piece of paper like a verdict. The educational trust, he was saying, will be transferred to Garrett. As for Tori, $5,000, someone murmured. That's when I stepped forward. Actually, I said, that's not true. Every head turned. Behind me, the front door opened. Caldwell entered. I set the folder on the table. My grandmother left everything to me, I said calmly. And I can prove it. You could hear breathing. That's how quiet it got when I said it. My grandmother left everything to me. 30 people. 30 different reactions in real time. Confusion, disbelief, interest, fear, relief, and one expression I knew better than my own reflection. My father's. Control slipping. Tori, he said, slow and warning, like I was a child reaching for a hot stove. This isn't the time for your little fantasies. I didn't answer him. I answered the room. I'm sorry to interrupt, I said, my voice steady even though my heart was trying to climb out of my throat. But what my father just read is not my grandmother's will. It's his version. Caldwell stepped forward and opened his briefcase. The sound of that zipper. Louder than any shout. He pulled out the original trust document and held it up. This is the irrevocable trust of Eleanor Brennan, he said clearly, executed 8 years ago. Filed, notarized, and legally binding, he began to read. And with every sentence, the ground shifted. Sole beneficiary, Victoria Brennan. A gasp rippled through the room. The trust corpus, Caldwell continued, $620,000, held with U.S. Bank. Garrett's face drained of color. Additionally, Caldwell said, flipping the page, the property located at 4714 Hawthorne Street. My father took a step forward. Stop. Caldwell didn't. Shall transfer in full to the beneficiary upon the settler's death. Someone whispered. The house. Yes, the house, the one my father had treated like a throne for decades. Never his. This is a lie. My father snapped. She was confused. She didn't know what she was signing. Caldwell placed another document on the table. Physician's cognitive evaluation, he said. She scored above average for her age. Signed and dated. Silence again. Then the emails. Caldwell lifted them high enough for everyone to see the highlighted line. She won't fight it, he read aloud. She never fights anything. That's the beauty of it. The room turned toward Garrett. My brother stared at the floor. Meredith slowly pulled her arm away from his. Aunt Margaret stood. Richard, she said quietly. Let them finish. My father's voice cracked. I was protecting this family. I looked at him. You weren't protecting us, I said. You were protecting control. My mother stood up. For the first time in my life. You owe her an apology, she said, shaking but firm. You've owed her one for years. My father said nothing. He walked into his study and closed the door. The room exhaled. 30 years of silence answered in 47 minutes. The room didn't explode. That surprised everyone. No shouting, no chaos, no dramatic collapse. Just gravity. When my father closed the study door behind him, the power he'd carried for decades didn't follow. It stayed outside, awkward and useless, like a title without authority. People didn't know where to look anymore. Some stared at the floor. Some stared at me. A few stared at the door my father had disappeared behind, waiting for him to come back and fix this the way he always fixed things, by deciding the ending. But this time, the ending wasn't his to write. Aunt Margaret was the first to move. She crossed the room in heels she'd worn to church for 30 years and wrapped me in a hug that smelled like perfume and coffee. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you," she whispered. My cousin Danny came up next. He didn't say anything, just stood beside me, shoulder to shoulder. Present, that mattered more than words. Others followed. Quiet apologies, awkward nods, the kind of support that comes late but still counts. Not everyone. A few relatives grabbed coats and left without a word. When people benefit from silence, truth feels rude. Garrett stayed seated. He didn't look at me. Caldwell closed his briefcase carefully. "I'll be filing a petition Monday morning to remove Richard Brennan as trustee," he said. "Effective immediately. The trust is frozen." I nodded. The house felt different already. Like something poisonous had been aired out. 3 days later, my phone rang. Dad's name lit up the screen. I answered because part of me still hoped. "You've destroyed this family?" he said. "No," I replied calmly. "You did? I just brought proof." He hung up. That was the last time we spoke. The court moved faster than I expected. Richard Brennan didn't contest the removal. His own attorney told him he didn't have a case. And fighting would only make it worse. The trust transferred. $620,000. The house deed changed. My name and Garrett? The bar investigation came quietly but decisively. 6-month suspension. His biggest client dropped him within days. The golden child lost his shine. 2 weeks later, I stood on the sidewalk outside 4714 Hawthorne Street. The key felt heavier than it should have. When I opened the door, the house smelled like lavender and old books. For the first time in my life, the silence inside felt peaceful. Winning doesn't feel the way movies tell you it does. There was no music swelling in the background when I unlocked that front door. No triumphant moment where I laughed, or cried, or threw my arms in the air. What I felt was quiet. The deep, unfamiliar kind. The house was empty of people, but not of presence. My grandmother was everywhere, her reading glasses on the side table, the faint lavender smell clinging to the hallway, the creak in the third stair she used to warn me about when I was little. "Step there," she'd say. "That one complains." I walked room to room slowly, like I was afraid to startle the place. This house had never been gentle before. It had always been loud with opinions, expectations, rules that bent around one person and one person only. Without my father's voice filling it, the walls felt like they could finally breathe. That night I slept on the floor of my old bedroom. No sheets, no bed made. Just me and the ceiling fan ticking softly above my head. And for the first time since I could remember, I slept straight through the night. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in small, awkward pieces. Like my mother calling and not whispering. Like her coming over on a weekday afternoon without my father, planting tulips with me in the front yard. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Dirt has a way of saying things people can't. "I should have protected you," she said finally, pressing soil down around a bulb. "I know," I replied, "but you're here now." That mattered. I paid off my student loans next. $38,000 gone with one check. I stared at the confirmation screen longer than I should have. Not because of the money, but because of what it represented. A weight I'd carried alone. Lifted. Then I did something my father would have called irresponsible. I quit my job. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. Out of choice. I leased a small studio in the Alberta Arts District. Nothing fancy. Brick walls. Big windows. Enough room for drafting tables and plants and quiet. I put my name on the door. Brennan Landscape Design. Not his legacy, mine. The house changed too. I turned my father's old study, the room where he'd passed judgment on everyone, into my workspace. The leather chair went into storage. The law books disappeared. In their place, soil samples, plant guides, rolled up sketches. It felt like reclaiming something that had never been meant for him in the first place. Garrett texted once. "I understand." I read it. I didn't respond. Understanding without accountability is just another form of avoidance. If he wanted a relationship, he'd have to show up differently. That wasn't my job anymore. A month later, I drove to the coast. Cannon Beach. The cottage. I hadn't been there in years, but the key turned like it remembered me. The ocean air hit my lungs hard and clean. The porch wrapped around the house just like I remembered. The same weathered wood, the same sound of waves pulling back, again and again, like they were teaching the shoreline how to let go. Inside, on the kitchen table, was a small wooden box. Inside that, photos, me and Grandma, every age, every summer, and a letter short, simple. "If you're reading this, you were brave enough." I cried then, not from pain, from relief. I come here when things get loud in my head. When I forget what peace feels like. The ocean doesn't care about titles or betrayals or family hierarchies. It just keeps doing what it's always done. Standing there, I finally understood something my grandmother had known all along. Protection doesn't always look like fighting. Sometimes it looks like planning. Forgiveness is a word people love to use when they're uncomfortable with consequences. I learned that the hard way. A few weeks after everything settled, after the court filings and the quiet redistribution of power, my phone started ringing again, not from my father, but from relatives who hadn't said my name out loud in years. They all sounded the same. "I just want to move forward. Family is family. Life's too short to hold grudges." None of them said, "I was wrong." That difference mattered. My mother was the first one I let back in fully. Not because she deserved immediate forgiveness, but because she showed up differently. She came without excuses. Without defending him. Without asking me to make things easier for her. One afternoon, sitting at the kitchen table, she said something that stopped me cold. "I didn't think I had a choice," she admitted. "And then you showed me I always did." That was accountability. That was effort. So we started rebuilding, slowly, carefully. Like replanting something fragile. Garrett tried next. He showed up unannounced one evening, standing on the porch like he wasn't sure he belonged there anymore. He looked smaller. Less polished. "I messed up," he said. "No, worse. I used you. I waited. I thought Dad was right." He continued. "That you'd never fight back." Silence sat between us. Then I said, "You don't get to apologize and expect access. Those are separate things." He nodded. That was the first honest thing he'd done in years. My father never called again. Through the family grapevine, I heard he told people I'd been manipulated. That I'd turned against him. That the house should have been his. Same story. Different audience. Some people never change because they don't know how to exist without control. I stopped trying to explain myself. Peace doesn't need witnesses. One afternoon at the beach cottage, sitting on the porch with the tide out, I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because what happened was okay. But because it no longer owned me. That's the part nobody tells you. Closure isn't something someone gives you, it's something you stop waiting for. The last time I saw my father was from across a parking lot. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No final speech. He was loading boxes into the trunk of a car that wasn't his. Older model. Scratched paint. The kind of car men like him never imagined driving. He didn't see me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need him to. People think winning looks like revenge. Like rubbing success in someone's face. Like showing up stronger, louder, richer, just to prove a point. That's not what this was. This was quieter. Stronger. Permanent. A year later, the house on Hawthorne Street looked different. The lawn was full. Native plants, wildflowers, things that didn't need controlling to thrive. Wind chimes hung where judgment used to live. The dining room table was still big, but no one sat at the head anymore. When people came over, they sat where they wanted. That detail mattered. My business grew slowly at first, then steadily, then confidently. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't chasing validation. I was building something that didn't shake when someone raised their voice. Clients trusted me. Employees stayed. Turns out when you don't rule with fear, people don't spend all their energy trying to survive. One night, after a long day, I sat on the back steps with a glass of iced tea and realized something hit me hard enough to make me laugh. I wasn't grounded anymore. Not by my father. Not by fear. Not by the role they assigned me when I was too young to refuse it. I had outgrown the cage without ever asking permission. The family still talks. They always will. Some say I broke tradition. Some say I was ruthless. Some say I was lucky. Let them. The people who benefit from your silence will always call your voice a problem. On my grandmother's birthday, I drove to the coast. Same cottage. Same porch. Same ocean. I brought flowers and walked down to the edge of the water, shoes in my hand. I did it, I said quietly. I didn't let them turn me into them. The waves rolled in like approval. Here's the truth nobody warned me about. Standing up for yourself doesn't just change your future. It rewrites your past. Every moment you thought you were weak, you weren't. You were surviving. And survival isn't failure, it's preparation. My father spent his whole life believing authority was something you took. My grandmother knew better. Authority is something you earn, and something you lose the moment you try to control instead of protect. She didn't leave me money. She left me freedom. If you're watching this, and you feel small in your own family, if you've been silenced, dismissed, laughed at, grounded in front of people who should have protected you, hear me clearly, you are not powerless. You are just early in the story. And one day, someone will ring a doorbell you thought you controlled, and everything will change. Because truth always walks in uninvited.